Magandan, Umagan, Sai, Inyon, Lahat. I hope I got this correct, and hopefully, I'm a Singaporean, so I'm actually trying to learn this, in a very short nick of time. Kamusta kayo? So the topic for today I'm going to touch on is network modernization for the hybrid workplace, and I will be touching a little bit of security, across the entire solution. So bear with me. Now, the sharing that I'm going to have today very much focused on what we have recently announced in Aruba, US, Las Vegas Atmosphere event, where we announced a couple of key topics. So I'm going to share the content, throughout my presentation. I have only about 36 slides that will probably take me an hour or so. So let me start the presentation proper. So these are basically some of the challenges that we are seeing in the customer's environment. Hybrid workplace or hybrid work is actually here to stay. Some days we work at home, some days we work in the office, some days in other places, and people need to be productive. Digital transformation is accelerating. Companies that were further along the digital transformation journey tend to do better when the pandemic hit. Now there is a real acceleration of those projects that didn't quite get done before and are now trying to play catch up. And we need the network to respond and be agile for that. Now, users also expect more personalized experience. For those of you who have been working from home, and I'm sure the Filipinos are, some of you may be at home right now, working at home, or some may be in the office. When you're working at home, you have a lot of personalized experience, and you, for the past 2 years or so, you will have actually, be very comfortable with the setting that you have at home. But when you now go back to work, you realize that, hey, that personal experience no longer exists. So that is another pain point. Line of business wants solutions for better efficiency as well. They care about business outcome. All they really care is, they don't really care about how, but rather they care about what and when. All this leads to the need updates the network to achieve the modernized network, which is a continuous journey. Let me talk about 3 characteristics of a modernized network. The first component here talk about assist and complement automation. Okay, just take note, automation here is to supplement human. It is not to replace, just to be very clear. The IT operator in this case is the one that we want, machine to help IT operator. Let me give you an example of myself. I was a pre-sales engineer, and as Maurice earlier mentioned about my profile, I was formerly from 3Com before I joined HP ProCurve back in 2005. So that's how long I've been with the company. I was actually a pre-sales engineer, and I was configuring, helping customers to configure network. And it was actually quite a tedious job because I was, managing and setting up network of like a few hundred switches. And configuration of one switch, is easy. But if you are going to replicate that configuration across 200-300 switches, and after a while, you get tired and you will start to have configuration error. And that was exactly what happened back then, 2 decades ago. And trying to find error after configuring the number of switches is like finding a needle in the haystack. It is actually very, very tough. And back then, there was no automation at all. There was really no tools. All you have to do is, console into the switch, key command, and then you start to configure VLAN, configure ACL, configure spanning tree, configure VRRP, and many others. So imagine I've got 200-300 switches to configure. It was really a very, very tough situation here. Okay, now next, I want to talk about security. So bear in mind, before I go further, the example I gave you earlier on about configuring 200-300 switches, I will come back to tell you how Aruba can solve this in a secure manner. Next, I want to talk about a bit of security. Now with SASE, SASE, and Zero Trust, and that follows the user, the device, and application. Security requirement has not decreased during the pandemic. In fact, we saw an increase during the pandemic. Example, we see ransomware, we see different types of attack. And I'm sure many of you here may have heard us discuss during the panel discussion about how hackers are using AI and machine learning to actually now speed up phishing attacks, ransomware attacks, malware, and many, many others. So this is not going to slow down. It's going to accelerate even more by using AI and ML, the hackers are going to do. Now, during the pandemic, we also surveyed more than 80% of organizations say that they saw IoT devices on the network, but it wasn't installed by them. Customers are now patching up their application and often overlook the network security requirement. And of course, last but not least, we talk about agility. Agility here really is about the speed to change. The network must be agile to change. Your network must be able to handle, in the event where we go into a lockdown again, are we able to now be able to handle it securely, allowing our employee to now be able to connect from home anywhere. So the network must have that capability to adjust to that requirement. So I'm going to talk about Aruba ESP. Aruba ESP stands for Edge Services Platform, and I'm sure my colleague Gordon briefly have talked about that yesterday, but let me do a quick recap because it is actually first thing in the morning and I think you are very fresh, so it's easier for me to articulate this in a proper manner. So Aruba ESP comprises of 4 core attributes that enable organization to focus on harnessing the power of the intelligent edge. Let me start with the first layer right at the bottom, and that is known as unified infrastructure. Unified infrastructure allows your organization to eliminate operational silos and streamline operation by unifying operation across your wired environment, your wireless environment, your SD-WAN environment for your campus, your branch office, remote worker, as well as data center, all using a single pane of glass management we call Aruba Central, our cloud native platform. Now, this is also where the physical devices live and is the layer through which data travel from point A to point B. And if you look at the slides, I have got access point that you're very familiar. So for customers who have Aruba access point, that falls into the unified infrastructure layer of the Aruba ESP. Wired switching, we also sell switching as well. So for those of you who are still depending on wired connectivity, I'm sure you have. So that falls under the unified infrastructure. We have SD-WAN, we have 4G, 5G connectivity, and finally we have IoT. Now, according to IDC, we are expecting about 55 billion devices that will be connected to the World Wide Web in the next couple of years. And that is actually growing. In fact, like I mentioned in my earlier slides, when we survey organization, more than 80% of them actually saw a number of IoT devices that wasn't installed by them. How do you actually secure it? And this is where the second layer of Aruba ESP comes in. So edge to cloud security or zero trust security primarily allows organization to simplify the task of securing your edge from IoT devices, while also at the same time simplifying security operation by eliminating the need for static configuration and cumbersome ACL that are creating untenable pressure on your IT teams. This is the software-defined policy layer, and some in the industry refer to this as an overlay. This is the layer where many of Aruba's edge services platform security services operate to provide traffic segmentation, provide firewalling, authentication, continuous monitoring, unified threat management, etc., etc. And finally, at the top of the Aruba ESP, the third technological attribute is known as AIOps. AIOps is what gives Aruba network a sixth sense that allows you to resolve issues before they impact your business, or at least resolve them faster so that your business keeps humming. Earlier, I believe Gordon, like yesterday, briefly touched about AIOps and he talked about self-driving network. So I won't go into the detail, but you get the where the message is coming from, right? So with AIOps, we can actually be able to resolve issue much faster. And I want to bring up one use case of AIOps. One of our very large retail customer in the US, where they have thousands of stores spread across the entire United States, they were experiencing network performance issue on the wireless network. They were intending initially to put in more hardware and buy a lot more devices, to help the network speed up. But before they do that, we got in and we spoke to them. We used AIOps to actually help to figure out what the issue was. The fortunate thing is we were able to resolve issue by looking at the traffic that people are going through. Remember, it's a retail store, retail space. So there were a lot of passerby who walk past the building. And when you walk past with your mobile phone or smart devices, even though the smart devices are not physically connected to the wireless network, the nature of how Wi-Fi works is it will actually send probing signal and that actually drag the performance of the wireless down. So what happened is we actually use AIOps to figure that out, and we look at the relative signal strength of the devices outside the building. We look at the bandwidth that was transmitted. We look at the dwell time, and we know that, hey, these are passerby. So AIOps automatically help to resolve that issue by fine-tuning the network to react only to the internal network so that the passerby don't actually drag the network down. So that is a result of how we resolve issue much faster without additional hardware. And finally, I want to talk about the last piece here, and it's about as a service. Okay, and this is the place which allow organization tremendous flexibility in how we consume and pay for the technology that you need to accomplish your goal. So these are the ESP architecture in a very short, quick nutshell. So let me talk about the first announcement that we made recently, and this actually talk about introduction of cloud authentication. So company dynamics have changed in the past year, welcoming a wave of remote workers as well as those working in hybrid environment. However, unreliable network access and new security concerns can disrupt business and cause help desk calls to solve. Applying consistent security controls and ensuring users have seamless access to apps and data in the office, at home, and on the go is a critical mandate. Aruba Central simplified this process for IT with cloud-based authentication, or AUTH in short, extending its ability to deliver a single point of visibility and control over your entire network infrastructure and related security services. Let's have a look at a quick overview of how AUTH actually works. So employee devices can easily be configured for seamless configuration to wired and wireless network. Devices used by employee or staff, for example, can easily be configured for seamless connection to wireless network. Managed through Aruba Central, end users are authenticated through the company's cloud identity store with an enrollment link provided on Aruba Central. When I say cloud identity store, the two popular ones are Microsoft Azure Active Directory or Google Workspace. These are the two primary ones that we support today. We may support more in the future. Now, using company credential to log in, the user will be redirected to the identity store for authentication. Client devices can be configured using Aruba Onboard, a client app that is supported on Mac OS, Windows, iOS, and Android operating system. With the enterprise passpoint profile installed on the device, anytime the user walks into range of the network, the device will automatically connect with the appropriate network access rules as configured by the admin through Aruba Central. The client app provides automatic renewal, requiring no additional onboarding steps and keeping an upkeep from the end user while allowing the admin to change and update policy at any time. Now, the Cloud Auth dashboard in Aruba Central provides granular visibility into authentication from user, as well as session detail for clients that are connected to access point managed by Aruba Central. From the authentication tab, the IT admin can see detail on the number of successful as well as failed access requests within a select time range, and includes breakdowns of user versus client requests, client roles, and failure reason. Example, whether it is connected to the wrong SSID, what is a rejection reason, etc. The session tab display metrics such as the number of active sessions, MAC addresses, whether it is a randomized or a non-randomized MAC addresses, the duration of each of the sessions that the user are connected, and the data usage during each session within a selected duration. Google Workspace Directory and Azure Active Directory is supported today. We may support more identity store in the future as well. And lastly, ClearPass Device Insight gave us the ability to gain visibility and insight into IoT-driven network. And we are pulling some of that intelligence into Aruba Central with client insight to ensure policies are applied and enforced. Let me introduce another challenge here. Many customers are actually facing digital transformation challenges. Network vulnerability, as I earlier mentioned, have increased. In the past, when I was still much younger, working in 3Com about 2 decades ago, wireless was literally unheard of. We were depending a lot on perimeter firewall to actually defend the network, from outsiders coming in. But as technology evolved over the past, 2 decades, wireless began to get more required in the network. And now we're seeing IoT devices, and this expanded surface of attack where hackers can now have the ability to connect to the network by using wireless devices, by IoT devices. And I remember, the host, Maurice, was talking about how a casino aquarium was hacked a few years ago in the US. And that is through the thermometer or thermostat that was being used to monitor the network. So those are IoT devices. And that actually, gave that expanded surface of attack for hackers to be able to connect the network. Now, the other area that I mentioned about earlier in my beginning of my slides, when I was still a pre-sales engineer from 3Com, I was actually configuring a customer network. So when an IT workforce are overloaded and they have to now be able to configure the network, those are really a very tremendous tedious effort for the engineer. And after a while of configuration, the engineer will actually have created error, and some of this error may not be found immediately, and that may actually bring network down. So customers do have digital challenges along the way, and last but not least, I won't go into the full detail. It actually brings the network down due to misconfiguration. Just to give you a quick glimpse of some of the network configuration siloed, and they are quite manual and tedious. Let's take into the life of a network administrator. Okay, for those of you who are a network admin, I empathize your role and your challenges. So when you're configuring access point, for example, access point has got multiple type of policy. You will be creating like the SSID, and each SSID mapped to a VLAN. You've got to figure out the encryption, the strength of the encryption, whether are you going to use a high encryption or the WEP encryption. You got to figure out whether you will use 802.1x. And if you do 802.1x, you need to configure radius server. And I will go into the radius server part of it. As you know, it's going to be fairly complex. So that's only one part of it, and that is access point policy. And it's, as you can imagine, it's actually a very tedious role to do. Next, we have gateway policy. And for those of you who are managing routing or router or SD-WAN, you may be familiar with the type of WAN transport and protocol that you need to use. You'll be figuring out the number of links and how do you provide redundancy. Are you going to go MPLS? Are you going to go direct broadband link? Or are you going to go these lines 0? Those are the type of challenges that administrator will have to face. And finally, we have also switch as well. For those of you who are managing network infrastructure using switching, I mentioned earlier on, you'll be configuring things like VLAN, ACL, spanning tree, and there are various types of spanning tree back then, right? We have 802. Spanning tree, rapid spanning tree, multi-spanning tree. There is also network routing as well. So these are areas that you've got to figure out. And of course, .1x. So these are the different types of network configuration that network administrators have to do. And configuring it can be quite tough. And if you misconfigure any steps, the network is not going to go up. And if you are going to embrace IoT, which I believe many of you here will, or your customer will, you will need to make sure that you are able to secure them. So it is not an easy task to actually manage all this. Now, Aruba, many years ago, actually introduced dynamic segmentation. Dynamic segmentation unifies role-based access and policy enforcement across the wired and wireless, as well as your wide area network, with centralized policy definition, ensuring that user and devices can only communicate with destination that is consistent with their role, keeping the traffic secure and separate. As the name indicates, okay, dynamic segmentation, it encompasses two critical capabilities. First one, we have dynamic, and that refers to Aruba's ability to assign role-based policy on the fly to a wired port or wireless client based on factors such as access method of a client. And when incorporated with ClearPass, we can add additional context such as the time of day, the type of machine. This dynamic capability is enforced by colorless ports, which means IT staff no longer needs to statically pre-configure access port to VLAN and uplinks. This significantly reduces IT operation, planning for initial deployment or ongoing configuration changes to accommodate the add, move, and change. The word segmentation is the second capability, and this refers to our ability to segment client traffic with tunnel-based segmentation overlay that can coexist with VLAN. This provides enhanced security and performance benefits enabling customers to deploy segmentation with minimal modification to existing infrastructure. Now, do take note, dynamic segmentation is actually a very useful technology and has been deployed by many organizations. However, there is a little limitation to the existing solution. There are primarily two limitations. The first limitation is that when you configure dynamic segmentation, the ingress enforcement node must know all the destination. And as you know, when the network becomes very dynamic, sometimes the destination may not be easy to be made known. Secondly, the destination, you must also have a statically known IP address. So that is the limitation of a dynamic segmentation. Let's take a look at what Aruba is introducing recently. So we talk about Aruba Central NetConductor. Now introducing the Aruba Central NetConductor, or ACN. Internally we call it ACN for the SEs. So Aruba Central NetConductor is a management interface that lives in Aruba Central. Let me break down Aruba Central NetConductor into two pieces. First is a configuration UI, and the goal there is to try to sort out the configuration, making it simpler than it was in the past. So we get things, like intent-based workflow and allowing you to be able to set up the network quickly. For example, I give you what I did in my previous job in 3Com, where I was configuring 200 over devices. Back then, there was no tool, so it was quite manual, right? So imagine now I have to roll out these switches, and I want to allow contractor to be able to get access into the customer network across the multiple locations. It is a very tedious task because I will have to go to the firewall, configure the role, and saying that this contractor is going to be allowed to access the CCTV in site A, for example, and if customers have got 10 sites, I've got to configure all 10 sites. Very manual, very, very tedious. With Aruba Central NetConductor, I could actually now be able to resolve this a lot quicker. The second piece of this Aruba Central NetConductor happens in the infrastructure itself. I'm going to illustrate how this is going to be done in the next slides or so. Okay, now it starts with intent-based policy definition with primary focus on client identity and not on the network. This is essentially how we separate from competition. Because our focus is on serving the client that connect into the network, that consume the application, so the policies are tuned to the client and not to the network. Once the policy are defined in the Global Policy Manager, which is a new component of Aruba Central NetConductor, it automatically orchestrates these policies. It distributes these policies into devices such as those like gateways, switches, and access point. It talks to network authentication mechanism like ClearPass or cloud authentication. With insights such as client insights, it gives a full 360 view of network. What Aruba Central NetConductor does is it enable you to deliver 360-degree orchestrated services for network and security, and it simplifies the design and help enforce security at every access layer. With Aruba NetConductor, or Aruba Central NetConductor, client traffic routing and security policies are decoupled from the underlying physical network, eliminating the need for VLAN and routing table spreadsheet creation, eliminating the need to manually configure ACL. All clients and devices are assigned a role. The Fabric Wizard, based on UI-driven workflow, help automate that network design and policy creation, and automatically pushes device configuration to switches and gateway. And with wizard-based workflow, you will never miss a step of configuration. So now we have two different flavors for doing dynamic segmentation. On the left is the classical approach, which is a centralized overlay, which says bring everything back to a gateway, and that gateway has layer 4 to layer 7 firewall intelligence, and we can enforce things that way. That's one approach, and this solution is not going away. The advantage of having a centralized overlay enforcement is that firstly, it is very simple and easy to deploy. Secondly, it has consistent experience across your wired and wireless infrastructure, as well as your SD-WAN connectivity. Thirdly, it enhanced security feature. But now we expand that with distributed overlay enforcement, which is on the right, where multiple elements can actually do enforcement So my ingress node might say I have half the policy, I know the source user, but I don't know about the destination yet. So I'm going to send this to another device on the network or another node within the network. And that node is going to map the egress role, and ultimately that traffic will be allowed or denied. And we do this based on EVPN and VXLAN, okay, which is a very common protocol that we're seeing in the industry. So the advantage of having a second approach or distributed overlay is that firstly, it is open and it's multi-vendor ready. Secondly, it has got higher scale and better performance. And thirdly, consistent operation across your campus and your data center as well. So let me come back to the example I gave you earlier where I was configuring a network. I guess since the network is actually long time ago, it is Motorola in Singapore. So Motorola today may not exist here, but we were actually configuring and contractor were needing access to some of the CCTV across the Motorola plants across the various sites in Singapore. So creating rules for CCTV, allowing contractor to get access 100 sites can be a very difficult task. With NetConductor, if we have it back then, and imagine right now, if you're going to replicate this to your customer, you can now set global policy with a few clicks in Aruba Central NetConductor. Once configured, the policy will push down to all the gateways, switches, and access point, giving you automation at scale. Part of Aruba Central, no separate SKUs is needed to sell. You don't have to sell any additional SKUs. Okay, services available with Aruba Central Advanced License, that is, they are added to Aruba Central services. Some of the early capability are already in place. Example, cloud authentication I mentioned in my earlier slides. VXLAN support is already supported right now. Client Insight in Aruba Central is there as well. The full suite of services will be available in Aruba Central 2.5.6, and that is coming around Q3 timeframe, which is anytime in the next 1 or 2 months from now. Now, let me switch gear a little and talk about our development on Aruba EDGECONNECT. As you may have known, earlier, I believe Gordon talked about Aruba acquisition of Silver Peak just recently. So that acquisition is complete, and we have now fully integrated the solution into Aruba portfolio. So Aruba provide a comprehensive, secure edge SD-WAN portfolio that enable organization to architect a secure access service edge, or SASE, okay, for organization undergoing WAN transformation that span enterprise, branch, small office, and remote worker solution. For purpose-built EDGECONNECT WAN access solution provide flexibility to address a wide range of corporate network requirements, either locally, regionally, or globally, with consistent network and security policy. Aruba EDGECONNECT Enterprise Architecture is an advanced SD-WAN edge that continuously learn and adapt to changing business needs and deliver maximum network and application performance from the edge to the cloud. Aruba EDGECONNECT SD-WAN, SD branch, consolidate branch networking component for maximum integration across the wireless LAN, the wired LAN, and SD-WAN with integrated security and onboard LTE support with centralized cloud management. Let me spend some time talking about the hybrid workplace solution that we recently introduced, and that is the Aruba EDGECONNECT Micro Branch. Micro Branch SD-WAN and SASE services are delivered via cloud-based Aruba Central and any Aruba Wi-Fi access point, giving you the flexibility to choose the access point, connectivity, and performance options that is suitable to your remote location, from access point with Ethernet ports for plugging in of voice over IP phones and printer, to the latest Aruba Wi-Fi 6E access point for greater density and performance. So all services are delivered via the access point, no on-premises gateway, no endpoint agents, no additional hardware or appliance are required at the remote location. This makes the solution much simpler to deploy and operate. So for those of you who are going to work remotely at home or when you're traveling, staying in a hotel, all you have to do is just bring this micro branch access point, plug into the network, and the access point will do all the work for you. It will automatically tunnel back to the office. There is no need for you to retrain user. There is no need to do any deployment. So it is just plug and play, and it's very easy and useful for customers who are on the go. Okay, the good news to existing customers of Aruba is that Aruba customers with AP300 series, 500 series can now upgrade to run AOS 10 software. We will also be having AP503H coming shortly, and our AP560 and 560EX. They will be added into Aruba Central 2.5.4. Okay, now any 7,000 series and the 9,000 series gateway can also run AOS 10, which allows you to be able to now set up a VM tunnel from anywhere. Now, Aruba EDGECONNECT SD-WAN Fabric automates the integration with leading cloud security partner solution from Zscaler, Netscope, and many others. This gives organization choice in implementing best of breed edge to cloud SASE solution without compromising on either network or security capabilities. The Aruba Secure Edge SD-WAN portfolio provides IT team with complete visibility and tools to efficiently deploy, manage, and operate a modern network comprised of a single SD-WAN fabric for any-to-any mesh connectivity across location of all sizes, data centers, public cloud, and SASE. And SaaS, right? Secure software as a service. This results in an amazing experience for employee, customers, partner, guests, and IT team, and all managed through Aruba Central, giving you a single pane of glass management. Now I'm going to switch gear a little, and yesterday morning I talked about during the last panel question, there was a question about big data, fast data, and I mentioned about secure data. So this is where we want to talk about change gear a little to talk about how we secure the data center as well. Now, a survey that we have done, we found that many customers are familiar with north-south traffic. So let me talk about north-south traffic a little before I talk about east-west. So north-south traffic are basically traffic that goes from your handheld devices or smart devices or your laptop, okay, that connects from your network to the internet. So those are north-south traffic bound. But once the traffic enters the destination data center, the traffic, once it gets into the data center, it communicates between servers and servers or workload and workload within the same rack, across rack in the same data center. Those are what we call east-west traffic. Now today, many of the workload that we saw on a data center are 70% east-west, and they are not secure. So though many of the customers who have deployed data center, they have spine and leaf fabric that help, but critical layer 4 to layer 7 and security services have actually not changed. Let me bring up one approach that many of the customers are using today. So over here, this is a very simple network design where you see at the top, we have the spine switches, okay? And then at the top of each rack, okay, you see all these leaf switches here. You may have one switches or two for redundancy. And what many customers did is they actually depend on a centralized firewall. This next-gen firewall is used as a border firewall. And what many of them, the customer does is they actually trombone traffic. Imagine now I have got physical hosts, and each of these physical hosts may have multiple virtual workloads. What they do is they actually trombone or hairpin the traffic to get this traffic inspected by the centralized firewall. So I have a server in rack A, and it needs to get inspected by the centralized firewall. And I've got workloads in rack A that needs to be inspected as well. So just imagine all traffic are now trombosed into the next-gen firewall, the centralized appliance, and allowing you to do traffic monitoring, having the packet to be inspected. While this may be good, but is that really a good way of using the devices? Not really. Firstly, it resulted in poor use of bandwidth. Secondly, it resulted in congestion as well as introduces high latency. It is also very complex to design and troubleshoot, especially when there's a problem, right? And finally, the centralized appliance here is going to be a very, very expensive devices here that that the customer has to invest. What if there's a better way? Okay, instead of using a very high-end centralized firewall, please don't get me wrong. Please do not tell your customer to remove the firewall. All security products are good products. Just like yesterday when I mentioned about insurance, right? All insurance policy serve its purpose. And the same thing for security appliances. All security appliances serve its purpose. So we do not remove any security devices. We complement. So in this case, we are asking our customers, instead of investing in a very high-end centralized next-gen firewall, is to actually deploy firewall at the top of the rack. So imagine now I have security devices now placed at the top of the rack. Okay, this is actually a very good way of doing it, because this is the place where you should be securing your traffic. I'm not sure how many of you remember I said this. Security is a process, it is not a product. Security is a journey, not a destination. And security should be implemented where traffic leaves the network and traffic enters the network. And this is the place where we want security to be implemented, at the top of the rack, where workloads are closest to the server, closest to the workload, closer to the application, without transposing them to the centralized devices here. So in this case, using the same example that I gave earlier, I have workloads in the same rack, or where they need to go from one workload to the other, or from one host to the other. It basically are inspected right in the same rack, done by the switch, and then back down. Okay, and if you need to have traffic goes from one rack to the other, it will go from the leaf to the spine and to the destination. So this is a better way, because by introducing the decentralized service architecture, we now have the ability to actually inspect all traffic right at the source, closest to the application where it is generated. And that's the place where all activity should be inspected. And then leaving the centralized firewall to do its parameter services. So this actually helps to also increase performance as well. So this is a new way and a better way of doing this. And last year, October, we introduced our development with Pensando. So this is a joint development that we have spent about 2 years doing this. The Aruba CX10000 is the hardware that we are introducing in the market. And this is a CX platform that many of our customers are familiar with. It has all the richness of the CX software and capability. But in addition, we are also introducing firewall feature, and the flow management and all these little enhancement here that we're going to have. I won't say enhancement, but security feature like DDoS protection, using IPsec encryption, network address translation, and load balancing. So all this capability will be made available on Aruba CX10000. What is different from Aruba CX10000 and existing product of Aruba is that it comes with the DPU. I remember one of the vendors yesterday talking about GPU, graphical processing unit. We now have DPU, data processing unit, that is built into Aruba CX10000. There are 2 of these chipsets. Each of the chipset comes with 400 gig of firewalling throughput. If you have 2 chipsets, you aggregate, you get a total of 800 gig of firewall throughput, all built on hardware, but with software-defined control. Okay. So again, I won't go into the full detail, technical detail. I'll leave it out because of the keynote. So just make sure that you are aware of the solution that we introduced. So this is the hardware. It's our industry first smart switch for the enterprise that support distributed services architecture that allows you to be able to deliver firewall layer 4 to layer 7 capability right in a switch form factor. This is the first in the industry, and I don't believe any vendor has this capability today. Okay. Now I'm going to switch gear a little to talk about location services. I know I'm actually almost near the top of the hour, if not almost there. So many of you here may drive, and for those of you who drive, you may be familiar with GPS using either Google Map or Apple Map or Microsoft Bing or even Waze. So those are the outdoor GPS or software that you use to navigate when you're outside the building or when you're traveling from one point to the other, okay, using GPS. But that same software, whether it is Google Map or Apple Map, and when you move them indoor, you realize that it doesn't really work. Okay, the indoor location today lack that experience, okay, of location tracking. So today, the location services are based on XY coordinates, and they are unique to each indoor environment. These coordinates are based on ranging or angle of arrival or angle of departure techniques that comes from a referencing point. But these reference points are manually placed, which is time consuming. And of course, they are also subject to location inaccuracy, which has a downstream effect on user and device location. So having indoor location tracking sometimes can be very tough. You can see on the slides. There are primarily a couple of challenges here. Let me move to the next slide to talk about some of these why indoor location is not a very good solution today and what we are trying to solve. Now, indoor reference point remain the weakest link in this equation. For most deployment, customers rely on hand-placed reference points that are inaccurate. It takes up about 10 to 15 minutes per access point just to get the AP in place to be plugged into the map. For a customer with 5,000 access points, that is going to take a laborious 800 over man-hours to plot. And as a result, many customers are not plotting the access point in the map, and hence the indoor location tracking is not as accurate for that reason. Based on our experience, more than 80% of Wi-Fi AP unmapped. Imagine a building that is 50,000 square feet and you are using a 15-inch monitor. With just close to an inch of error in dragging and dropping an access point icon. This equates to 5 to 10 meters of placement error that result in inaccuracy or inaccurate location tracking. The other area of weakness that you may have noticed with existing indoor location tracking is that there is no three-dimensional alignment between the floors. So when you are actually in the building using two-dimensional map using X and Y coordinates, it is really not a very good way of having the solution. So what Aruba did is we actually cracked the code and we introduced OpenLocate. So this is the first self-locating wireless network that you're going to see. So what happened is we actually have an access point that comes with high sensitivity GPS built into the access point. Okay, and you place this access point close to the exterior of the building where there is satellite GPS signal that can communicate between the satellite and the Aruba access point using GPS receiver. And once that you place that access point, a few of them around the building, within the building, what happened is between the access point and the rest of the other access point, we can communicate to each other using fine time measurement using 802.11nc, which is the protocol that is open standard. So we can actually now have anchor access point using GPS near the exterior of the building. And then internally, we communicate using fine time measurement to the rest of the other access point. So we actually are now able to have a very accurate location, giving you the ability to look at longitude, latitude, and additionally, the elevation, giving you that three-dimensional capability of indoor tracking. And for tracking of client and assets, okay, we do have devices that are FTM capable. Those mobile devices or smart devices that are FTM capable, we can actually communicate to each other using fine time measurement, 802.11nc. For the non-FTM client, we can also communicate using Bluetooth and Zigbee as well. So this means that you can now actually be able to have accurate location tracking even to non-FTM clients. So having the solution from Aruba is that the AP comes with this high sensitivity receiver. So there is no need for you to buy extra hardware. It is already built in the access point. Stay tuned, I will tell you what access point has it. Okay, it also allows you to be able to interoperate with existing applications such as use of Google Maps, Apple, Blink Maps, okay, and allow you to be able to use location tracking in a lot quicker manner. So the hardware that is supporting this Wi-Fi 6 today are the access point here. So these are our Aruba access point that comes with Wi-Fi 6E that allows you to operate Wi-Fi 6 in a 6 gig radio frequency range. And this true model and the future Aruba Wi-Fi 6E as well will come with built-in high sensitivity GPS receiver integrated into the hardware. Now, for customers with existing Aruba 500 series access point, the 550, 530, 510, 500 series, and the 500H series, they actually comes with fine time measurement. So if we look at the map earlier on, if I go back to my map again over here, so this can be the newest access point from Aruba, the 600 series that comes with built-in GPS. So this would receive the satellite signal from the satellite that's outside and in the space, and that signal is being anchored into the access point. The access point will transmit fine time measurement to the existing 500 series access point that is over here. Okay, and we will now be able to accurately locate the access point. There is no need for you to do hand dropping of access point in the map anymore. Everything is going to be done automatically using map. Now, why I share this example is we are now going to use location tracking to some of these smart spaces. Example, we are going to have it in the form of retail space. We can track assets in retail space, track people in retail space, in manufacturing, in healthcare, in education. Now, people are our assets and they remain to be, we need to take care of them. So security needs to be placed correctly. And one of the use cases that we can think about is, with the pandemic right now that's ongoing, we can actually use this technology to not only accurately locate assets, find your way internally, but we can also accurately look at people if they are not well and if they are contagious. We can actually do location tracking of people based on the dwell time that they spend in the building or object, and based on relative signal strength and the signal that they communicate to actually locate if they are infectious. And finally, we can actually use Aruba Access Point as a IoT platform. Now, Aruba Access Point, you may be aware or may not be aware, is that it comes with not just Wi-Fi signal for you to communicate using your Wi-Fi devices and your smartphone or your handheld devices. It also has a Bluetooth built-in radio. It has Zigbee as well. This means that for customers who are deploying smart building facility, you can actually now plug in devices from ASA Alloy, for example, which is a keyless door entry for hospitality customers, to actually now be able to connect into Aruba Access Point. If you are in the retail space or focusing on the retail space, we also work with SES Imago Tech that do electronic shelf label that has a radio that plugs into the USB port of the Aruba Access Point and allowing us to be able to communicate to that device that transmit proprietary radio signal to the electronic shelf label and many other use cases. So again, these are some of the very good solutions that we have that we want to share with all our partners today. With this, I hope I maybe come close to the top of the hour, and I'm going to hand it back to the host to see if there's any questions.